Greetings, fellow Blackcoats and my paranormal enemies. Been a long time since we did a book review, but an indie author sent me his young adult sci-fi piece to review, and as it wasn't too long, I decided to take a little bit of time out of my schedule and nail out a review for him. And you know I don't like to bury the lead on you. It's not too bad. Now, obviously, if you watch my channel, you know young adult isn't really my cup of tea. It's not, my preferred genre by any stretch. As you know, I'm kind of a adult male. But he asked for my review. He asked for my opinion. So he's going to get it. So, the book is Blackcoats, Dead Man Walking by Mike Lackman. And the book, again, not to bury the lead on you, ain't too bad. It's got some issues that I feel like could have been weeded out by a good editor, but it's also got plenty of appeal, especially when you factor in the audience it's aimed at, which is young adults. I specifically asked him, hey, what's your target audience? And he said, 12 through 16-year-olds, so when you factor in the audience, a lot of the gripes that I have probably fall by the wayside because, I'm an older audience. So, in my typical fashion, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about the things that I like, the things that were done well, or at least passably, and then after that, we're going to move on to some of the stuff that needed work, or stuff that bugged me, followed by a wrap-up at the end. Let's go. Can't embark on this journey without my fucking addiction fuel. Engage. So to try to keep it as spoiler-free as I can, the gist of the book is this. High school student encounters paranormal circumstances, gets rabbit-holed into being a secret agent. That's the gist of it. And while the book is unfortunately lacking in any super great or witty originality or interesting plays on tropes and cliches, it is at least self-aware. And so there is a bit of meta and campy humor in regards to the fact that the book does nothing original. So, whenever a book is self-aware, that's nice, and it's a little bit fun to just see how willing the author is to, if not rip their own work, at least make a wisecrack at it. The other thing the book does very well when you take the target audience into mind is the book handles some pretty hard-hitting philosophical issues and existential issues. Who am I now that this has happened to me? How do I deal with this? What are my priorities? How am I going to get through this? And it deals with them in a way that the target audience can likely relate to and understand. So that was well done. And there's definitely an appeal there. If you're a kid and you want to read something that you feel like you can identify with, probably read this book and definitely relate, at least to some parts. Besides that, the plot, while predictable and while kind of a by-the-numbers G-Man story, it was well-structured and paced, and it did not have any holes, it did not have any glaring issues. And apparently, making a story without any plot holes is kind of a dying art form these days, especially if you look at Hollywood. So, he gets points just for being consistent in his storytelling. Something in particular that he did that I really enjoy is that, that style of opening where you start further ahead in the story and it's just a little snippet of the scene, and then the narrator begins telling you how they wound up there. That's how the book is structured. I like those styles of openings. I've always liked that style of storytelling. When it's well done, I think it's really kick-ass because it takes us on a wild ride from this weird opening that is completely out of context and shows us how a normal person got there most of the time, and it's usually really enjoyable. It's a little bit ham-handed here, but it's passable. And because I already have a predisposition towards liking that kind of opening, he gets points there, but not too many because it's ever so slightly ham-handed. especially in that the narrator says the book makes more sense by starting out at this point, and by the end of the book, you realize it in fact did not, and you could have started right at the beginning without having the snippet from the end, and it would have still made perfect sense. So I like what they were going for. I like what Mike was going for with that opening. Little ham-handed. You needed some polish. I also liked some of the references that the characters made. The characters routinely discussed pop culture, and the references were enjoyable, if not a little bit out of date. Harry Potter hasn't been overly relevant for a while, and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood has not been super relevant for a while. I mean, to weebs it of course still is, but you know, not everyone is a weeb. And by the way, Tyler, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is 10 billion times better than Full Metal Alchemist. Fight me. There are also a few good little nuggets of wisdom. The one that stuck out the most to me and that I actually made a note of was the main character has a bit of internal dialogue that says this, and this is a paraphrase, but he says something to the effect of, "It's funny how something can be the end of the world one day, and the next it's a minor inconvenience when you have real problems to compare it to." And that is profound. That is such a good little bit of wisdom, and when you apply it to many of the cultural, political, and societal issues in first world countries today, it really rings true. So it's a good bit of wisdom, and very on the nose and topical. Another cool thing that this author did that I don't think I've seen in storytelling in novels before is between the chapters there was very often supplemental world building in the form of police call logs, newspaper articles. They were JPEG images that, you know, were designed to look like newspaper articles from online websites, and there was other stuff like that in between the chapters, and it was really creative supplemental world building, and it really, if you paid attention and went through it, and sometimes it was a lot of small text on 2 pages, so some people might just feel inclined to skip it, and you'd miss a lot of the story, or at least you'd have to wait till the end of the book for a lot of the story, because if you read them, you can follow the plot and call all the twists like that. And if you skipped them, the twists would probably surprise you. So that's an interesting little method of supplemental world building. I like it, I approve, and I think done in a more adult story, that could be really interesting, and I would really like to see that. One more thing this book has going for it: if you are a parent and you're very picky about what your kid reads, you're very concerned with language and other types of adult content, could not recommend this book more. Very PG-13, no harsh language, no adult situations, and the violence is, you could see it on TV. So if you're picky about what your kids read, you probably want to grab this book for them. Now, the praise and the good feels and the yah-yahs do end there, and we're going to start talking about a few of the things that bugged me or a few things that didn't work for me, so let's get into that. So as I said at the start, I feel like this book needed one more round with an editor to catch a few sloppy mistakes, a few things that were kind of like, that really made it into the final product. It's nothing like super bad, but it's just like, man, it's just a silly little mistake that, and this is why I always stress critique partners and beta readers and working with an editor, because stuff like this grates on me. Here's a bit of dialogue for you. Even if you slacked off for a bit, you'd still going to end up with like straight A minuses anyways. It's pretty awkward, right? Editors help you catch stuff like that. It's a silly little grammar hiccup. It shouldn't have made it into the final book, and I would be doing a disservice if I didn't call out silly little stuff like that, The author needs to know about it so they can be more careful to look for stuff like that in the future. And you as the audience deserve to know that stuff like that is in the book before you pick it up, so that if that's the kind of stuff that drives you absolutely insane, you can avoid picking up the book and having an aneurysm when you see it. But if that's the kind of stuff you can tolerate, I'd probably still pick up the book, because there aren't that many of those in the book. In fact, that was by far the worst one I found, and I think I only noticed maybe one or two others. Another minor problem was there were a few parts where tense was not consistent. The book is told in first person past tense, and there were a few places where I noticed he briefly slipped into present tense, and it was only a few lines, and unfortunately I didn't jot down the examples when I saw them because I was just buzzing through reading, but I did mark it down in my notes, and so I'm confident I did indeed see it. And again, that's the kind of thing that an editor will help you find and snuff out. Another little nitpicky kind of thing that an editor would have helped resolve. There's a scene in the book where a character walks into a room and is faced with another character, and when he turns around to see if someone he walked into the room with is still there, that person is gone. He then turns back to the person who was already in the room. The person who was already in the room begins speaking, and the text says they look at the person who was just described as having not been in the room anymore. So if that wasn't clear, person A and person B walk into room, person C begins talking, person C begins looking at person B, who person A just said was no longer in the room. So that's a very sloppy and obvious mistake. And again, to beat a dead horse, that's what editors are for. So that one annoyed me. Moving away from silly little editing errors like that and moving on to greater scope writing stuff, there's a major plot point that kind of relied on the Dresden Files school of suspension of disbelief. The everyone has their head in the sand kind of suspension of disbelief storytelling, and it doesn't work for an adult audience. It definitely doesn't hold weight, especially the way it's explained. Factoring in the audience the book is targeted to, yeah, it might hold weight, but for me, I read it and I was just like, oh, bullshit. It might pass muster. In fact, it probably would pass muster with the average 12-year-old, but when I read about the explanation for this particular plot point, I was just like, oh my god, no, not believable. You pushed suspension of disbelief too far. Try again. So of course, that one bugged me a little bit. Another thing that's kind of a greater scope issue that kind of, if not grated on me, was certainly apparent the entire time. As I said, the book does not tread any new ground. It's not overly original. There is no subversion, clever or otherwise, of tropes or cliches. It's very much a by-the-numbers, coming-of-age, secret agent story. Kid gets powers, joins government agency, beats the bad guy. Like I said, it's by the numbers. And it's self-aware, it is meta, but it's still not doing anything new. And I always like originality. I really enjoy originality. And so the fact that it doesn't have much originality to offer docks points for me. But all in all, those are the major issues. Like I said, the book has a decent story. It's enjoyable to read. There was no point where I was just like, oh my god, when am I going to be done? None of that. It was a decent read. A good way to spend a rainy afternoon sitting at home doing nothing. So, overall, I would probably give Blackcoats by Mike Lockman a 6 out of 10. He gave it a solid college try, and if I was a more young, impressionable, easily impressed reader who hadn't read some of the absolutely amazing books that I had read, which have raised my standards, I might give it a higher rating. But I am who I am. I have to rate it according to my criteria and what I look for and what I like, and I have to be honest. So, as much as I hate giving bad ratings or even mediocre ratings, because I love spreading love. I love hyping people up. That's just the kind of person I am. But 6 out of 10 ain't bad. It is not bad at all, especially when there's a book on my channel that I rated 0 out of 10. So, hey man, take what you can get, right? All right, guys. The author is Mike Lockman. The book is Blackcoats, Dead Man Walking, which is a very cool title, in my opinion. You can check him out on Amazon and his author website, of course. I will have links down in the description, as always. Videos are going to be coming this weekend. We're going to continue on with world building, and there's going to be a Music Monday for Women's History Month. So check that out if you like classic rock. And all right, until next time, be well, my friends. See you next time.